Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Jackie Carpenter, and she is an author. We just got done talking about books, and now we're talking about books a little bit more, but we have the author herself with us to talk about her book. Thanks for being here.
First of all, thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah.
I never wanted to be an author and never intended to be an author, but our family went through such a huge tragedy back in '08. My son, who was a home builder in Georgia, and about 30 miles south of Atlanta. Are you familiar with copper theft?
I'm not.
All right, copper theft is a huge thing in Georgia, and I've learned from traveling all over the United States, interviewing about these books, it's a huge thing everywhere, not just in the state of Georgia. But what that is, my son had 8 houses under construction in a secluded subdivision. And is where thieves will actually go in and they strip out the copper lining, refrigerator, heat and air, and they sell it. And they probably get $50 for it, but the damage they leave behind is about $6,000. My son had been robbed of copper 17 times, so figure it.
Sure.
But in this one secluded subdivision of 8 under construction homes, he had been robbed 3 times in 1 week, and he couldn't get any relief. But on Friday, June 27th of '08, a young deputy met my son at the construction site to give him advice on how to handle this. But what he told my son Kelly was that it was the truth, that law enforcement cannot guard his houses 24 hours a day, and you have to do that to catch copper thieves. So what he said or suggested was that my son hide in the woods, watch the next house with exposed copper. If they come back, all he had to do was call 911, and what he could do is have patrolmen guarding the area, and once the call came, they could be there in a matter of minutes. Well, I didn't like that either, but my son is a perfectionist, and he went on to ask this deputy, what if they do this? What if they do? What if they leave? And he went on to tell him, well, in the state of Georgia, you can make what is called a citizen's arrest if you had to. And that's where you are allowed to hold them at gunpoint, and you are allowed, you know, it's almost like the police making an arrest, but really you just bind their hands and feet, let the police handle it. Well, who would have thought it would have come to that? I mean, you know, they'd already robbed the subdivision 3 times in 1 week, and he had a full-time security guard coming in on Monday to take over. He was just doing it for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. He was in the woods watching the next house with exposed copper, and the unthinkable did happen. They did show back up, and he immediately called 911, as he was told to do. But then he turned around and he called his father-in-law, who lives about 10 minutes away, who also knew he was out there and worried about him. We were all worried.
Oh, yeah.
But the father-in-law said, do you need me to come over there? Jason said, I'm scared to death. He's whispering. He's in the woods. He's watching this. And the father-in-law comes. But see, little did my son know that this young deputy never alerted law enforcement he was out there. There were no police in the area. There was no backup. So what happened next was the father-in-law pulls in behind this van, and Jason is watching this from the woods, and he thinks, I can't sit here and watch this, because the father-in-law gets out and starts approaching the driver's side of the van. So Jason comes out of the woods. He fires a warning shot in the air. He had an old double-barrel shotgun, so they wouldn't hurt the father-in-law. He approached the passenger side, and they go into what is called now a citizen's arrest. They order him out. The 2 up front are totally cooperative. They speak very little English. The 2 up front get out, and they lay down on the ground, and Jason can still see shadows in that van. He keeps on to tell them, come out, I don't want to hurt you, the police are on their way. Finally, another guy comes out, and he goes to lay down. Jason goes and the father-in-law is standing in front of this rebellious guy who wouldn't come out of the van. As Jason goes into this part of the citizen's arrest, still no police, he starts to bind the hands. They're laying down. As he goes to bind the hands of the first one, the father-in-law standing by that rebellious guy, he sees the rebellious guy getting up. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He doesn't know if he's going for a knife or a gun, but he's going for the father-in-law. So Jason grabs that old gun back up. He runs over, finger nowhere near the trigger. He uses it like you would a stick to push him down, and when he did, it fired. And it shot that guy. Still no police. They call the ambulance. When the ambulance don't get there, Jason, the father-in-law, start trying with a 911 operator to save the guy. When they see they're not getting anywhere, the father-in-law gets him up, rushes him to the hospital, where he does die in the early morning hours. Now this is where everything goes from tragedy to worse tragedy.
Right.
When the deputy gets word that his advice had gone so far bad, so horribly wrong, He runs to the judge in the early morning hours and says he did meet my son, but he never told him to make a citizen's arrest. He never told him to do any of these things. He never told him to hide in the woods. And he wants my son charged with felony murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm. And that's exactly what happened, and that's in the bridge.
Wow.
That's in the bridge.
Wow. Well, we're going to come right back. We're going to go over to Chris, but we're going to come back and talk to her.
Okay.
This had me on the edge of my seat, and I want to find out more about what she's got to say. But first, let's go over and see what Chris has to say about the weather. Welcome back. We're here with Jackie Carpenter, and she is the... Welcome back. We're here with Jackie Carpenter, and she is the author of a book called The Bridge and Georgia Justice.
Yes.
And also a movie coming out about her adventure, misadventure, horrible situation.
Yeah.
Now, you had just told us this harrowing story of what occurred with your son, how he was wrongly accused of murder, if any of you are just joining us.
Yes.
And now you have written another book, and it's called Georgia Justice.
Yes.
And it talks about Psalm 91.
Yes, it does. Because, see, as a mother, Kelly, my son had been placed in cell block A, and that is the worst of humanity, okay? And he was innocent. And before we could really even get in to see him, the same deputy who had really had my son put there had gone back down to the construction site with the other 2 alleged copper thieves, and now all the news cameras were down there where they were telling the world that my son had executed their cousin. So now my son was being tried through the courts of public opinion and the bloggers, and it just kept getting so much worse, and we couldn't say anything. We were under gag orders. So for 10 months, this thing literally got so much worse. And as you know, there comes a time in your life when money cannot help you, man cannot help you, and your innocence is not enough. So as a mom, I started trying to find the answers and fix it myself. But what I was doing, Kelly, was literally killing my physical body. I was researching 25 hours a day, trying to find the answer to this thing, and I ended up in a hospital bed. And I was getting a blood transfusion, and it's almost like that is exactly the place God had to get me away from the research books, to get me away and be still and know and listen. And what he was telling me was, Jackie, you're researching the wrong books. Man doesn't have an answer for that. And he didn't. We had the best attorney money could buy, and he didn't have the answer. But what God was saying was, you know, you're going to have to live your life in a different way. And when I went to CVS Pharmacy to get my medications, there was a book facing me called Psalm 91, God's Shield of Protection. I bought it, I took it home, and I climbed in my sauna, which I converted to a prayer closet, and I started reading about miracle after miracle of such situations where there was no hope, and God had intervened with a miracle. And I knew if we didn't get a miracle, my son was going to prison for 30 years. And he had a 6-year-old little boy and a beautiful young wife, and he was innocent. And I just could never accept that fact. But if you read in both books, you will see how there was no way out. I mean, even the best attorney in the Southeast was telling my son, take a plea bargain, go to prison for 3 to 5 years. There was absolutely no way out. But God was telling me in Psalms, there is a way out. He was telling me, false witnesses will rise up, but it's okay. I can take the devices of the wicked and make them to non-effect. I can take the crooked way, I can make it straight. In Psalm 91, he was telling me you don't have to be afraid of the terror by night and those arrows that are coming at you by day, because I can put angels around you and I can deliver you. I will deliver you. So you know what? I just had to start living my life, Kelly, in a different way, because man was killing me. His answers and the flesh was just dying. But God was saying, I can help you. I can do supernatural things that man cannot do. So I just started hooking up to Psalm 91 for life support, and that's how I started living my life from day to day, minute to minute, because no matter what man would tell me, God would tell me it's going to be okay. And literally, that's what sustained me for 10 months is Psalms. Even going into the courtroom at the last minute when they said, you can come to court, but don't bring your Bible. And I was hooked up to it. I couldn't go without it because I couldn't survive a murder trial without it. But their reasoning was real. I mean, because if a juror was a non-believer and they saw my Bible, that opinion alone could send my son to prison for 30 years. So you can understand their reasoning too. Sure. But yet I couldn't not go. I couldn't not take my Bible and survive a trial, so I took it. And anyway, 2 months later, after all of this, I was sitting at my desk, and lives had started moving on, and God spoke to me and wanted to know what the worst was. I said, well, that was when Jason was in sub-block A, and he wanted to know the best. I told him that's when you come down the aisle with our miracle. And he said, what was the bridge that joined really the worst to the best? And I said, well, that was Psalm 91. And he said, let's start writing. And Kelly, he started dictating, and I started typing, and before I knew it, there was a book out there with my name on it, Psalm 91. And then later, I was walking, a year later, I heard that same voice saying, Jackie. And I said, no, I don't want to write another book. And he said, but no, wait a minute. He said, that book covers the tragedy, the trial, and the triumph, but what about the tears? And that's what Georgia Justice says. Wow. It's a book that covers what I went through mentally, physically, and emotionally for 10 months as a mother.
Wow. Fantastic. What a wonderful story. It's such an inspiration and a wonderful, wonderful story of the Lord's deliverance.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Real quick, she's got a movie coming out. You can go to GeorgiaJusticeMovie.com to find out more about that. And again, just Google her if you want to find out more.
Yeah.
We loved listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, we'll be back with more Good Day after this.